surrounding area of Austin.
Right. Pause.
Or
Pause. Are you the inventor of that? I mean, I've never heard that in any other state I've ever been in. I'm Alex Del Sordo with the Rower's Choice Network, and this is season 3, episode lucky number 9. And I have someone I've never met before. Digitally, I have actually never heard of this person up until a couple weeks ago when we suggested out to the world of rowing, who should we interview to get to know more? And she came top of the list. And here I have what I think is probably the second best name we have ever interviewed, Falesha Thrash. I feel like I'm a rock star. I feel like I'm a skateboarder, but I have someone who knows rowing, who knows a lot about rowing. We're gonna learn all about her past and the future where she's headed in rowing. Falesha, thank you for being part of the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I'm really excited to have this opportunity to talk to you today.
I love it. And I just want to hear all about you. That's the whole point of this thing. We're just going to learn about you. Now, Falesha, I ask the same question every single time, and it's very simple. Where were you? How old were you when you first started rowing?
Yeah, I was actually 18. I grew up in a small area in Texas that didn't have rowing. And so when I went to the University of Texas, I'd always been super active in high school with track and field and all kinds of things. And I didn't have anything when I went to UT, and I just picked up a flyer on campus and went to the orientation. I remember my first day of orientation, I was just so excited. I had gotten all of the friends on my floor that I lived in the dorms with to go with me. I didn't want to be by myself. And it was just, like, I remember being super giddy, sitting in the boat and taking my first stroke while they just, had the boat on the dock. And it was so exciting. And then, of course, the first day of actual tryouts, when I went in, they explained what a coxswain was and that they were 110 pounds, which was exactly what it was at the time. So I was destined to be a coxswain and didn't actually sit in the rowing seat for a while after that.
Falesha, you're super giddy. You jump in a boat. You're 18 years old, which is great because I think we've interviewed hundreds of people, and I think the best ones are always the ones that didn't start in high school. Like they're a little bit older, they're starting later. So first off, who was your coach at the time? I'm really interested to know who your coach was that gave you that great experience.
Yeah, so I was on the men's club team. It was men and women then, but I want to say, let's see. So Will Wynn was my novice coach, but Jeff Mork was the coach at the time, the head coach of the program. And I know he's over at UVA as a rigger right now.
Wow. So a coxswain, you probably had never heard of that word before leading up to it. What was that? How hard of a decision was that for you to make? Aside from the weight and your size, like a coxswain, you're just sitting in a boat steering. Was that a challenge for you? Was that difficult?
Not really. The first day of tryouts, we actually just went for a run, and our coach had pointed out, the varsity boats that were going by, and what each seat was, and that's when they explained what the coxswain was to me, and I, looked around and saw these other people that were way taller and huge compared to myself. So I was like, okay, well, that's kind of like a natural position for me. I'll take it. And I just went with it. I never really went back and thought, it would be a lot more fun to be a rower, but I was probably the only novice coxswain in my class that didn't actually run into anything. So I think that just kind of gave me a natural selection for being the first coxswain in my class this year. So that was fun.
Now, were you naturally like a leader at a younger age? Because, the most successful coxswains in our sport are usually type A, grab the world by the throat. And I got this. I mean, was that your natural inclination growing up?
I wouldn't say early on, but definitely more like once I got into high school. I was, graduating out of high school, I was like president of band, and I was a leader with my track and field team. And so I just kind of gravitated towards it probably more around 15, 16. And then once I was started to get leadership roles, just kind of grow into it and decide that I liked to be the person that people could go to as a resource, so that I realized that pretty early on. So I think that's why I kind of gravitated towards being a coxswain as well, like in terms of like, yeah.
So I loved it. I love when you said the president of band. I was a saxophone player. I tried the violin for a while. I did it from third grade all the way until an adult. Like, what did you play? What was your instrument?
Yeah, I started in the band in the 5th grade, I think.
Yeah.
And I started with the alto saxophone, and then yeah.
Me too. Yes.
Yeah, my mom played saxophone, so it was an easy, oh, this is great, here, do this. So I started with the alto, and then in the 7th grade, I wanted to differentiate myself because there were so many alto saxophones, but so then I switched to the tenor saxophone, and I stuck with that throughout, yeah.
I love it. This is awesome. You're so funny. Wow, I knew that we had a connection. I knew it. I knew there was something that we could connect with. I was an alto saxophone player. I went right into the tenor saxophone in the jazz band. And then in junior year of high school, the band director, Mr. Shields, said, you should be the baritone sax player. Like, we need someone good. We know you could play. And I jumped in and I finished my high school career in the baritone sax. And my gosh, that was fun. Oh, I loved it.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, the baritone saxophone players we always had were, like the 6 foot tall dudes. So, here I was at the time, I think I weighed 80 pounds in the 8th grade playing the tenor saxophone. So I think that's big enough for me.
It's so funny. The most kick-ass woman in band class in 8th grade was Alicia Valente. Shout out Alicia Valente. And she played the tenor sax, and she was exactly like you. I mean, this little tiny 80, 90 pound girl, and we got along wonderfully. Anyway, that's awesome. So I circled something else. You said you liked being the go-to resource. That is so important. And then we're going to get into that a little bit later, but tell me what happens after UT. What do you do? Like, where do you go from there?
Yeah, so I actually, I started working at the Texas Rowing Center when I was, this summer coming out of my sophomore year was the first summer that I stayed in Austin. I didn't go back home. And so I started, one of the varsity coxswains had already worked at the Texas Rowing Center. And she said, oh, I've got a great job for you. You literally just call members up off of the membership roster for the dock and say, I'm going to go out in the floor today or tomorrow or this day. And do you want to go out and just build a boat? So that was my job that summer, was literally just calling random people off of the membership roster and getting them to go out in the team boats, which at the time we only owned one Cox boat, which was a Cox quad. So we just went out in that whenever I formed a lineup. So after I obviously stuck around with the Texas Rowing Center. And so after I graduated, I spent a year, I coached the novice women for Texas Crew for the first year out of college, and while also working for a criminal defense attorney, which is super interesting. So I would go have crew practice, 5 a.m., coach there, go right into my office clothes and be an office manager at a criminal defense attorney's office for all day. And then I would go back to TRC and then coach the juniors. So I had a really long, like 5 a.m. to 7 p.m. Day, like every day for the first year. And then I decided the criminal defense attorney, while it was interesting, was not the route that I wanted to go. So I became a bagger cashier at Whole Foods. I stuck with coaching the juniors at TRC. So, and then I just moved up the ranks at Whole Foods, and now I'm a senior executive admin for the CEO at Whole Foods and still coach.
You're the senior admin for the COO or CEO?
CEO. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so for those not watching but listening, there is an audible pause here because I have been floored. I am floored. I have a million thoughts in my head right now running through my head, Falesha. This is very interesting. So you're you are a force to be reckoned with in the sport of rowing in Texas, but it's your side hustle. It's your passion. It's your thing that you do when you're a senior admin with the CEO of Whole Foods, not like Whole Foods, like not just some little shop down the street, like Whole Foods. All right. So you're new to the sport of rowing. You're 18 years old. Fast forward 4 or 5 years later, and you're dedicating yourself from 5 a.m. all the way till 7 p.m., 8 p.m. What did what happened to you with rowing? Like what made you want to do this for what seems to be the rest of your life?
Yeah, I don't know that I could have like pinpointed at the time or knew at the moment that I would still be here today, even, coaching for the same program. But yeah, just liking it, and as you get older, time goes by a lot faster. So it just really escaped me. But it just, the kids in the program, I had a rough first couple of years, just with some changes. So I started the juniors program at TRC with Matt Nifton, the owner. We started with like 6 kids the first fall. And so that was coming out of that summer where I was just calling membership and coxing this Cox squad. But we started a juniors program that fall with like 6 kids, 2 who were siblings. And we had a different coach that actually coached the kids on the water, because I was still at UT, so I was just coxing these kids in this Cox squad for the juniors practice while the coach coached. And then he ended up moving to Houston. So then the next spring, Matt said, "Hey, you've been with the program. I want you to take over the program." And I said, "Okay, well that's great." He said, "By the way, we're at like 80 kids now signed up. So hire all your friends." So then I hired all of my crew teammates to be my assistant coaches, and we started like a real recreational program with the juniors. And then the next year or two started competitive. So I started coaching, just like kids that never had any idea what rowing was, and then moved over to the novice men's position coaching once we were able to hire more experienced and seasoned coaches to coach more of a varsity. And then once we got big enough to actually split up the girls squads, Matt asked me to coach the varsity women. And so that was the first time I was really dedicated, like female, like coaching the women, and I've stuck with it ever since. But yeah, I think that after kind of getting like in the earlier years when I didn't really know what I was doing, neither did the kids, and we just had a really great time, and it was super fun. But then once I started, coaching the varsity women, where things got a little more serious, these kids actually wanted to row in college. These kids, wanted to go to nationals. They had a higher drive. They were more of, going the route of being an elite athlete. They had a lot more natural gift of athleticism and skill, and they wanted to dedicate this crazy amount of time. And, that was always the kind of person I felt I was. So I really wanted to be connected with the kids that wanted to be at the higher level. And then just being a part of growing this program has been huge, going from 6 or 8 kids back in the fall of 2003 or 2003 to now we have 200 kids, so I like impacting, I feel like I make an impact on a number of kids. So it just feels special to me, and it's just not really something I ever thought I wouldn't do.
So while we're talking, I write a lot of questions, and I'm like trying to figure out where I go from here, because this is a fascinating story that I don't think a lot of people know, right? And it's fascinating to go from 6 to 200. There is no overnight success, and it took you 20 years to get there. But I guess my first question is, where did you find your education to improve your coaching, right? You don't know much about the sport in 2003. Let's be honest. You're fairly new to it. And like you said, you're just in it to have a great time. But then in the course of 20 years, I know how difficult it is to coach. I know how difficult it is to find education in our sport. Where did you go? What were your resources? How did you develop and improve your coaching style?
Yeah. So in the beginning, like as a coxswain, I think that as long as you're able to multitask with your responsibilities, but then also absorb what the coach is not just telling the athletes, but how they're making their changes, and you can put those two, the visual along with what they're saying. I think that was the first step. I didn't, while my novice coach was a coxswain, a former coxswain himself, my varsity coach didn't really, dedicate time to the as much time to the coxswains as the rowers, which is pretty standard. So I just took it upon myself to start to record myself. I thought I was some like, um, I I was like, I'm going to record myself. Nobody's ever done that before, and this is how I'm going to live. I thought I was being super unique with this, but of course, it ends up everybody does that. I didn't know. So just in doing that, I was kind of helping myself educate myself. But then Jeff Moore and a lot of the coaches with Texas Crew, he was super helpful in just teaching me rigging. Some little basics that I could just take and grow from, and then just kind of Googling. To be honest, when I was in college, Facebook had just become a thing. I'm going to date myself a little bit here, but you actually had to be in college to be on Facebook, and you had to be invited to Google to have a Gmail account, things like that. So there weren't a ton of resources online yet. It just kind of came about maybe more after I graduated college. But I didn't, I think what I learned and what I can maybe pass along to younger coaches that might find themselves in a similar route is I I I've, I'm probably loyal to a fault. Like I didn't want to explore outside of my bubble for a long time, only because I felt like if I did something outside, it it would be viewed as I didn't have what it took to stay around, or I didn't want to invest in. So I didn't look at it the right way. So when opportunities came about to go and like Cox at Penn AC, or go and do this, or change programs, or I didn't want to explore those avenues at all. And I think that caused me to have to like be self-educated a lot more than I really needed to. So any of my regrets, I wish I had gone out more outside of my bubble earlier on, and that would have helped further my education. So I would say probably only in the last 7 or 8 years that I dabbled more in, I became level 2, I think like 6 or 8 years ago with US rowing, and that was super helpful. And I remember Dave O'Neill being there and doing a demo on the erg, and just changing the way that I thought about like how to communicate, certain, instead of saying finish, it's the release, like just really basic, simple things. And I didn't really think about that. And so I think that opened the door a lot more, just exploring, and then starting to go to US rowing conventions and meeting more coaches. And again, it was all about like getting outside of my bubble. And especially out of the central region, I think that I've made a lot of friends with coaches inside of our region. So, we might go grab a drink or hang out and share some info and things like that at times. But it's really hard to start to earn that trust within your own region of coaches, because they're also competitive against each other, that it makes it difficult when you're just trying to learn. You're not trying to steal their secrets or their athletes or anything like that. You're just trying to help yourself, and then in turn, be able to pass on that knowledge to somebody else. But yeah, so I've just made a point of trying to continue with that. Riding in the launches with more coaches. We've been super fortunate with having a lot of the elite athletes training in Austin in the last 5 or 6 years. So riding in the launch with the coaches that come down and do the training with those athletes, and then just anytime I have a recruiter in the launch with me, picking their brain about different things. And then of course I did the level 3 coaching with US Rowing last fall. So, and that was probably a longer answer than you were looking for, but
I love the answer because I think selfishly, I think a lot of people do listen to this. I think, and what they're doing is they gather a little bit of what, just little snippets of what you're saying. And I wrote down a bunch of things, and we're trying to help young coaches build a playbook on success. And one thing I wrote down is part-time growth. It's just taking you a long time to get there. And that's one thing that younger generations don't understand, is that it takes 10 years, it takes 15 years. It's not going to happen overnight. I do like that you've learned that there's a bigger world outside of Texas, and that you got to find it. And that's how you actually improve your coaching. So when I was in high school, this is 2000s, early 2000s. So we're similar in age. Facebook came out when I was in college, and it blew my mind. I mean, it was so cool. My girlfriend at the time actually built my profile. I'll never forget it. She had access to my Facebook. It was really weird. But in the course of all this time, I didn't think Texas was fast at all. I knew nothing about Texas. People would say, "Oh, Texas," and you'd laugh. And it's like, well, they just play football down there. They don't actually row. But to get 200 kids at your program over a period of time is pretty impressive. What do you think has been the reason for the growth in Texas? Because it's blowing up, like the Woodlands, you guys, White Rock, Dallas United, like it's a growing force, and there's a lot of speed. What do you think's happened in the last 20 years there?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a combination of factors. I know with my program in particular, it was building, like just starting to find success, and then just getting that message out there that you can row in college. Hey, we have a state championship. Let's go race at the state. You can be a state champion, with the Texas Rowing Center. Let's go be a regional champion, and then go to nationals, and it's going to open all these doors for you. But it's also, we became off-campus PE providers, and a lot of kids just get started recreationally because they want their PE credit through their school, and they're going to come and row instead of, play dodgeball or kickball or whatever it is that they do in PE class these days. So that was a big boost, and I think one of the original boosts to the program. And I think that really caught on a lot. I really don't know how that works outside of the state of Texas. But I think that
I want to ask about that, because I have, like, you blew my mind again, because what a brilliant thing. Like, you can get 8th grade and 7th grade and 6th grade kids to have a PE course, or even high school. Are you the inventor of that? I mean, I've never heard that of in any other state I've ever been in.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely aren't. The school district came up with that, and they offer it with karate or club swim. There's a ton of different club programs in the Austin area that they submit an application with the school district, and they become an off-campus PE provider. Of course, there's a lot of requirements, which are pretty standard these days with being a coach anyways, background checks and CPR certifications and things like that. But we're a off-campus PE provider now for every single school district in our surrounding area of Austin.
Right. Pause. Okay. What are the requirements for an off-campus PE? When do you have these athletes rowing? You got to give me the details. I got to spread it. I got to be the Pied Piper here.
Okay, great.
How do you do it?
Yeah, so each school district is a little different, but AISD is the one that we work with more, the closest. Austin High is literally in our backyard. So it's pretty standard that they just have to come 3 days a week, and they do their, the physical activity, which is rowing. And then AISD has a little bit of more like a workbook that they also have to do. So we have a coach that provides a lesson each week, and sometimes it's about like drug and alcohol abuse, and sometimes it's about how to monitor your heart rate, and sometimes it's about even more serious topics like suicide. So these coaches are educators in the sense that they're providing an actual lesson that the school district has provided, and then the kids have to answer 5 or 6 questions, and they're super strict about They have to be 3 sentences long on every, so they're actually making them think about how they're providing an answer rather than just, bullet pointing an answer or anything like that. But yeah, so they come 3 days a week at a minimum. I have kids on my squad, even on the varsity squad, that are doing PE credit because they didn't get it through their school, but they're coming 6 days a week. So they're
what are the hours?
meeting.
How are these kids getting there, and what are the hours of this PE class?
Yeah, so they get there just like any other athlete would, like maybe their parent or they drive themselves. We do have one school that brings a bus by because we have like 30 or more kids that come from that school, and it is further away. And so they provide a bus to the rowing center just along their bus route, and they drop off all the kids for practice. But then they're on their own basically for getting. So we don't really. St. Stephen's, there's one private school that provides transportation, but it's only in their 3rd trimester. But otherwise, they're just on their own like any other athlete.
This is like the end of the day, right? This is not like at noon. This is done at 3 o'clock.
Yeah, it's at 5 p.m. Yeah.
5 p.m.
Yeah, so it's after school.
What has been the success rate of getting people to continue rowing for TRC? Like how many kids, let's say you have 30 kids from this one school, what's the percentage continue rowing in high school and competitively?
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't done the statistics myself. I do manage the roster, I do all the admin for the team, but I would say it's pretty high because I wouldn't say, so back in the day, all of our novice rowers came from our recreational program. But nowadays we've just kind of gotten into, you can come from rec, but you can also just start fresh, and we just kind of sort it out. But a lot of the recreational rowers, they just really like to row, and so they'll continue year after year after year. It's actually a lot more rare that we have a kid that only rows 1 semester or 1 year. I would say it's probably 10 to 15% that only are like a one-off. So, but we also offer, there's a category 1 and a category 2 for PE credit. And the category 1, if these kids are nationally ranked, so for instance, Youth Nationals is coming up, they can apply with their school to be a category 1 PE student instead of category 2, which gets them out of school for their last period. Like they get a free period, so they're able to dedicate more time to their training because they're then, training at a higher level than say like the recreational athlete.
Okay. Falesha, this you this whole like young kids say that's like woke, like the woke culture. I am woke. I am blown away by this concept. I absolutely love your energy and your passion. I have one last question, because I think that what we're going to be doing is connecting later in helping us get this out to the rest of the world, because I think that there's a lot of key things here that we want to capitalize on because we want to see the sport grow, right? My last question is, which is more challenging? A job at one of the largest companies, Whole Foods, or running a practice with a bunch of novice kids on the water? Which is harder? Tell me.
Oh, geez. Probably running a practice with a bunch of novice kids on the water, to be honest. Yeah, they're just pretty different.
It's really different, Falesha. We are going to cut this one short because you gave us something that we want to jump on later. So Falesha, thank you so much for being part of this podcast. I had a wonderful time learning about you, and there's much, much more that we're going to be talking about with you in the future. Thank you for doing this.
Awesome. Well, thanks. I really enjoyed it.